Chapter 9. The final week. The following day, I arrived 1 hour early, to find that they were already there and they had landed the space vessel in the clearing. For quite some time, I stood there, just looking at the now familiar space machine. As it suddenly occurred to me that they had seen me from the inside, I resolved to advance just as the door opened, and the tall white-skinned alien appeared at the door smiling. As I got nearer, he remarked, "We were wondering whether you were going to approach or not. Please, do come up, there is no reason to hesitate." "Sorry," I said. Then I climbed inside the space vessel. I realized that the door that had been opened to me was placed lower than the one I had been using up till now. It opened directly on the curving corridor, and as it closed, the panel slid horizontally from left to right. Another one slid from right to left, then another one from left to right, and finally a fourth one from right to left. This was done extremely fast. About 2 meters from this outside door was another one on our left, that slid open and we went in. I was right behind the tall alien. Again we arrived into a circular interior room with no windows. One wall was taken by what I can only describe as a very large television screen, for that was what it looked like. He switched it on with a sort of device that looked very much like a remote controller. Just then, the brown alien who had regularly spoken to me and whom I had become much accustomed to, walked in, accompanied by a little black girl aged about 5 years, and by the pretty lady alien, with one of the small short aliens walking close behind her. They all sat down as the screen came on. The brown alien had in his hand a photo set in a silver-like frame that was transparent on the front part of it where the image was, while the back was totally made of the silver-like alloy. The little girl stood beside him, saying nothing and looking straight ahead without blinking. Without thinking, I extended my hand and took the picture from his hand, then lowered my eyes, sheepishly apologizing, "Sorry, but may I have a look at this picture?" "Yes, I brought it to show it to you," he said. I looked at the picture and gasped, "Oh, she looks quite like me. That is my daughter whom I told you about. Look," he said, pointing at the screen. Then I looked and saw the scene of a little girl similar to the one in the picture, playing around in a very large room full of toys. She had in her hand a shiny globe that she rubbed against her arm, then threw away from herself and ran to hide. She stood still for a second, brought a hand to her mouth and blew into a tiny whistle, then hid again. Suddenly the ball appeared, rolling by itself toward the little girl. As it came closer and closer she slowly moved away and the ball followed, till she could find no other place to hide. The globe then rolled to her feet and emitted a noise similar to a police siren. She was very content to play by herself in this manner, laughing happily and rolling on the floor with her eyes closed. "Now look," intimated the man grimly. I looked and saw a tiger-like beast suddenly appear in the courtyard of the compound where the house was. It jumped against a large door, which sprang open, and it went into the main building. People came running and shouting, holding some sorts of guns in their hand, while people inside scattered away, screaming and locking doors behind themselves. Then the beast entered into the room where the girl was playing. It stopped, then slowly advanced toward the now petrified child. Suddenly it jumped on her and the scene stopped. I had instinctively covered my face with my hands and screamed. That was the animal that I created, when my colleagues and I began experimenting, and you just saw how it killed my daughter. At that time we still had not discovered the secret of eternity, but that was done soon afterwards, too late for me to do anything for her. At that time, the separation had not occurred yet. The renegades had not yet rebelled, and their scientists worked in collaboration with us at that time. That was when I properly looked at him. "Eh? You look quite like my papa, my father Gaston Manny," I exclaimed. "Now I see why you looked so familiar to me. Well, that was very deliberate of me to look like him. We virtually engineered your mother and your father's meeting, and controlled everything for you to be born to them. I just chose a human who looked like me for what we had in mind. Even your mother looks like my wife, who is still very much alive." I did not even try to question him over that statement. I had seen and heard so much in the last 6 days that those words did not astonish me. But truly, I tried not to dwell on those words, because if I did, I would have disbelieved him, and he would have known. I did not want to provoke him somehow. Look, he said again, pointing at the screen. I saw my mother, aged 20 years, but looking more like a 13-year-old girl, and about 5 months pregnant, coming from one of my grandmother's farms and going back home. She had just arrived at another farm where my grandmother usually plants corn. It is immediately before a swamp that is quite close to the village. Across the trail, there lay the trunk of a very large tree. People usually sat on it to rest, before and after crossing the swamp. My mother was sitting on the tree trunk, leaning back a little, with her eyes closed. I saw her being levitated into a space vessel that was right above her. Then I saw her lying on a table quite similar to the one that had been used for recording the message into my brain. There were about 6 aliens standing around the table. Among them was the man who was now showing me the film. She seemed to be sleeping. They opened her up and were working on the fetus inside her womb. Soon they sewed her up again without leaving a single scar and deposited her back on the tree trunk. I even saw her awaken, looking around and then getting up and hurrying towards the village. She did not seem to be aware of anything having happened to her. That was you we were treating in your mother's womb. If we had not intervened, she would have miscarried, or you would have been stillborn. We had to work on you to correct a fault. You, yourself know that you have always been a very sickly child. He said. He was talking fast as if he was trying to justify himself. Yes, I knew. I had indeed been a very sickly child, and I had been so constantly ill that I had not even walked until I was 3 years old. Thank you, I said, turning gratefully toward him. Now I have 2 fathers, my biological father, and my papa from above, I said to him, really meaning what I was saying. We have had to intervene several times in order to cure you of some illnesses that would have taken your life, and to protect you from harm, he said. Now a lot of things that had been baffling me for a long time began to make sense. For example, a very out-of-place person that I had seen one night in my village when I was little, after I had nearly died during a hide-and-seek game. Now look again, he said. I looked at the screen and realized that the pictures had been changed. I watched, transfixed for a long time. Most of Earth's momentous events were played to me. I saw the war with the Watchers at the first time when they rebelled. I saw the destruction of a beautiful continent with explosions. I saw the flood during which Noah and a few others managed to save a number of people. I saw that the flood described in the Bible took place mainly in the Middle East. Some other areas of Earth were not as badly affected, and others not at all. I saw wars between different nations. I saw the Hebrews leaving Egypt at the time of Moses. They were certainly a lot different from the Hebrews of today. First, their skins were a lot darker than they are now. All were olive-skinned, and were easily distinguished by their particularly big and sometimes hooked noses, their small mouths and their closely set eyes. I noticed that quite a few amongst them looked like my late grandfather. The Exodus of Moses was nothing like it has been romanticized by Hollywood filmmakers. These people looked very dirty and very tired after just 2 days of travel, and the warriors very savage-looking. Those armies of warriors were a frightening sight to behold. They painted their faces and covered themselves with mud when they went to war, and looked ferocious. They were also merciless at killing their adversaries and conquering them. I know this because I was shown them taking over 2 cities as described in the Bible. They showed absolutely no mercy. All human beings in those cities were mercilessly massacred. I looked accusingly at the brown alien. Couldn't you just remove them and take them elsewhere? Surely there were other parts of Earth that were not occupied at that time? Why kill them that way? Even babies. He made to answer, but I interrupted him angrily. Yes, don't tell me. Earth was just a huge laboratory for you people. Only those who were obedient to you mattered. The rest were dispensable. I suppose it is still the case nowadays, isn't it? We are nothing but guinea pigs to you people, aren't we? Thou shalt not kill. Remember those words? You gave them that commandment, yet you also advised them to massacre other human beings, simply in order to install themselves in the already built cities, and to appropriate what those people had worked hard for. What difference is there between yourselves and human politicians? I had stood up without realizing it, and was shouting at them with my fists rolled. Amazingly, they sat there, silently waiting for me to calm down. Only the alien lady showed some kind of remorse. She seemed quite ashamed and avoided my eyes. An awkward silence followed my outburst. Then the black alien calmly stared me into sitting down, and then he continued to show me more scenes. I was shown that long ago, Africa had been a cradle of knowledge long before European nations were even formed into distinguishable ones, while they were nothing but scattered tribes and small agglomerations. I also saw that the Africans themselves were responsible for their fall from grace. That was mainly because of their worship of the renegades and the superstitions that ensued with the latter's flawed teachings. I can take the liberty of revealing here that some Africans also intermarried with extraterrestrials. In the region covering the south of Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, and the parts of Gabon bordering the above two countries, the epics of Akomo Mba and Abo Mama recount the exploits of those hybrid children of humans and extraterrestrials, giant people who lived there. The females of those extraterrestrials are described as very short but beautiful creatures that looked like Japanese women. Well, I shall continue with my story. I was even shown the 7 first laboratories where creation of humanity took place, and the work that was done to prepare the planet Earth. Everything had been filmed and recorded as they had been working. It was just amazing to see the incubator-like machines in which they mass-bred babies. Those machines were large, so all babies grew to full size in them, not like the multiple births we usually have in which babies tend to be much smaller. The machines were transparent and lots of tubes were attached to them, feeding nutrients that were automatically added to the liquid in the artificial machines in which the fetuses were being bred. Scientists, both male and female, walked around checking the babies and making notes on small flat handheld electronic ledgers. The babies were neatly lined up in their machines, and it made me think of the pink litters of piglets that I had seen being fed by sows in our village. Then I saw the time of Yeshua, and particularly the recording of his mother being levitated into a flying vessel after she had gone for a walk outside her village. A surgical procedure was carried out on the head of the fetus that Yeshua was, and his mother was brought back in a field and laid into the high grass. She never knew what had happened to her, as she had been asleep in that same field when she was taken. Contrary to the way she had been pictured, Miriam of Nazareth was not at all like the very white Caucasian woman we see in many paintings. She had a very Hebrew physiognomy. She had eyes quite close together, a long nose with a slight bump, and very good skin. But she was darker, like an Arab or an Indian girl. She was still very beautiful to look at, and quite skinny. She had brown eyes and long dark brown hair. It was Joseph, her husband, who was lighter skinned, but he too looked like a Hebrew. She did panic greatly when she had that visitation. Yeshua, on the contrary, had become accustomed to seeing a lion by the time he was 13 years old. In the last weeks before his death, he regularly went to meet them in the mountains, eating and sleeping with them and returning to his apostles in the morning. If I am to believe what I was shown, he was an extremely tall man, nearly 7 feet tall. He had piercing and virtually hypnotic brown eyes. He was not exactly extraordinarily handsome to look at, but he was fairly good-looking, and he certainly stood out in a crowd because of his height. He was also muscular and athletic-looking, like a sportsman. His features were those of a very noble Hebrew. But there was something about the eyes of the personality that I was shown. Once seen, he could not be forgotten. I was left with an uneasy feeling after staring at one of the moving images that were on the screen in the film that was running, and of course in it, he was very much alive. He had been captured and was being held by 2 Romans. But he seemed to be staring at whichever person was filming him, with a half-smile on his lips and a trickle of blood running from his right nostril. I guessed he had just been captured, as he was still fairly clean, and not yet at all badly battered. He was silently defiant and arrogant towards those who held him, like he was above anything petty, as if he knew himself to be, or felt superior to his captors. The smile was quite friendly as it extended to his eyes, but I found out that I could not take my eyes away. I felt trapped and immobilized by his stare, and when the picture moved on, I was left with an indescribable feeling. I actually had to shake my head in order to clear my thoughts. I was shown a lot more things after that, which are not necessary for me to mention. But among them was that accident I had had while playing hide and seek as a child. Had I not been so miraculously helped, I would certainly have died. Also, twice I saw myself being levitated above trees in my teenage years when I had found myself alone and in danger. I will tell about that later on, if I remember. I was shown things that happened on Earth, some of which I had not even had the chance to learn about at history lessons. Then I was shown even more wonders, views of many solar systems in our galaxy, and in other galaxies. I was shown especially scenes of some of the 499 planets, similar to Earth, that have been colonized by Alionen, and where they have also created living humanoid beings. There were many similarities with Earth. One planet was particularly pointed out to me, and I was told it was not very far from Earth. He said it was not too many light years away, about 20, and with the technology soon advancing on Earth now, it could be discovered by human astronomers as early as during the first 10 years of the coming millennium. He was speaking thus in 1973. He said they called that planet Emmet. He said that Emmet was not only like Earth, but that it was inhabited by humanoid people far more technologically advanced than Earth dwellers, and that atmospheric conditions in it were similar to those on Earth. Again he said, "Look at those children and men you are about to see, and remember them when writing about the young man from France, because they shall be very much alike in deeds, words and behavior. What you are about to see took place on Earth." On the screen appeared a space vessel in the sky, which landed in the countryside outside a city. There was a young man sitting beside a river and it was daytime. Next I saw him walking with small aliens similar to the ones who piloted the space vessel that had been used by my alien friends, but it had a swastika painted on its sides and underside. He was taken into the space vessel, which then flew off. "The young man that you have just seen was called Karl Marx," he said. "Karl Marx?" I echoed. "Yes," he said. "Now look again." I looked again and I saw another boy of about 8 or 10 years of age. He had gone on a picnic with his family, but he wandered off and came to a space vessel landed in a clearing in the woods. The boy stood staring at the vessel without any fear. Its door opened and a small alien, similar to the ones I saw with the other boy, appeared. He held a round object in his hand, which he proffered towards the child with a sly little smile. The child still did not seem frightened. Instead he walked towards the alien who moved back into the space vessel, still followed by the boy. When the boy went past the door, it closed behind him and the space vessel rose into the sky. That vessel also had a swastika painted on its underside. I was shown the same aliens visiting him several more times at different stages of his life until he was about 20 years old. The screen was then switched off. "That was Benito Mussolini," my friend said. My eyes opened wide but I said nothing. "Look again," he said. The screen had again been switched on. I was shown another boy being met by the short aliens as he played alone in a large snow-covered open area. He held a stick in his hand and was beating the snow rhythmically and counting repeatedly from 1 to 10 in an unknown language. At least I think he was counting. I saw him again being met 2 more times. The third time he was just coming out of a mountain building, and he had grown his hair long. That was the man known as Rasputin. I was told. Another young man about 16 years old was identified as Gurdjieff. The next person to be shown me was another young man who was about 17 or 18 years old who was also taken into the vessel of the aliens. The next time his face appeared on the screen, he was with 6 other people. They were in 3 cars driving towards a chalet that stood alone in a property that had no cities anywhere nearby. The cars stopped, all filed into the house, and a space vessel soon came and landed in woods behind the house. Then 3 small aliens similar to the same that have been shown me meeting the other different young humans, came out of it and followed 2 men who had stood, waiting and watching them land. The main man that was pointed to me as the subject of the aliens' visit had not been difficult for me to recognize. He was Adolf Hitler. That was Adolf Hitler, my friend informed me. Again I said nothing. He continued. As you saw, those different people were met by the same renegades, the ones known as Lucifer and Satan and another one of their chiefs. What those humans had in common is that their activities as well as their thirst for power and domination were instigated by those renegades that contacted them. It was those renegades who were the force behind those humans. Those renegades whom you saw contacting those future politicians and influential people are the same who are now in contact with the young man from France. Therefore, his future activities will be very much related to theirs, because through him, the renegades want to continue what they started a very long time ago through those historic figures you have just seen here now. What they did with those people you just saw is the same thing they are doing with him. Each one of them in his own manner was used by the renegades, and so shall he be used too. Remember this as you transmit our message. Now look again, the brown one said to me. I looked at the screen where the film of a child, a little boy of about 3 years of age, was now being shown. I was told that the boy I was looking at will also in the future be a very evil Antichrist figure, in that he would openly claim to be an Antichrist, and actively promote Satanism. He too would want to build an embassy for Satan. I was told that he lived in Canada. Also that one of his male ancestors, 10 generations removed, made a pact with Satan, and promised him that his direct descendant in the 10th generation after him would serve Satan. Thus the boy was born evil and a Satanist. He will begin to feel that way when he will be about 7 years old. According to the brown alien, that ancestor of the 3-year-old boy, was contacted by Izael, a demon that was amongst the fallen ones. Therefore when that young man begins to respond to his satanic urges, he too will be contacted by the same demon Izael. I was told that the young man from France should be the subject of my first book, but that in future, I should test my powers and faculties by finding him too, and that I should mention him in the future if I wished, just to tell my followers and humanity who he is, and alert them to his presence. After I was shown all these things and more, Elionin then began to teach me and enlighten me in the mysteries. Many things that my grandfather had told me rather cryptically were then explained very clearly to me. The inheritance of the mysteries that I had to pass on to my children was given me in a very modern and understandable method. I did not even have to learn Hebrew like my people believed. The part of the mysteries that I was going to give to my future co-workers for their own divine realization was also very gratefully received by me. I was even taught about how to lead a modern Essene community, but they taught me a very sophisticated political system, which they advised me to adopt. In short, they modernized and added to what my grandfather had already taught me. A lot more blessings were bestowed on me personally, and empowerment performed on me, of which I am not at liberty to reveal, as well as revelations of a personal nature. It would be very difficult to recount all the beneficial help, treatment, and intellectual assistance that were given to me. Only that I was simply left amazed at the kind of help and love that I was given and shown. I realized then that, really I had been entrusted with a true mission. It was a very humbling experience and it took all of a whole 4 days before the teachings came to an end. But during those days I still went home every evening and met them again the following mornings. This time I remained the whole day in conversation with them, not like the other times when they recorded the messages in my brain. But we still went to the Sahara Desert since now more than ever we needed to hide away, as we were together for whole days. On these times they spoke to me face to face, taking turns to teach me and perform all the ceremonies that needed to be performed. The alien lady taught me just once, but the rest of the time, she and the other alien who looked like her and who had always remained silent, just assisted the white and black alien during the ceremonies. But I am not at liberty to reveal what they did in detail. Finally, on Christmas Eve, I went to say goodbye to my alien friends. The space vessel had not flown away this time. Instead it was standing in the clearing, in the cocoa plantation. On that day, the brown alien, my papa from above as I now called him, handed me a shiny ball like the one his daughter had been playing with before she was mauled by the beast. It had one horizontal line on opposite sides that glowed and pulsated intermittently. And indeed it was the same, because he affirmed. Yes, It is the same globe. I have kept it over the millennia, and since we met I had wanted to show it to you. Go and play, he said, and he handed me a tiny silver-colored, metal whistle. He did not have to repeat his words, and I ran out of the space vessel with it. I rubbed the globe to my face and put it down as I had seen the little girl do in the film. Then I ran among the cocoa trees and hid. Finally, I whistled. I had noticed that a small light had also begun to throb on the whistle when I had rubbed the globe to my face. Soon the globe came rolling, following exactly the trajectory that I had followed. When I ran, it followed, and if I showed my face, it came straight at me. I could have played that way for hours. Finally I was called back. The most interesting thing was that nobody had actually said anything verbally. I was called telepathically, and I heard it very clearly. As I arrived at the door, the black alien was again waiting for me, with the little girl that I had already seen before. Once inside, I was told to play with her. When I asked what her name was, I was told that she had no name. Then he said that it was not really a little girl, but a doll, a biological robot. I now knew about biological robots, but that was not what I had expected them to look like. This one looked like a real-life 5-year-old girl. When I asked if she could talk, he said she could, but I had to address her before she opened her mouth, that she normally would not initiate conversation, unless it was to warn me of a potential danger. And she indeed walked normally, talked normally. She breathed also, and her skin was warm to the touch. I asked if she could die, and was told that she had a lifespan of 2,000 Earth years, unless it was decided to dispose of her before that time. I therefore played with the little biological robot that had also been made in the image of the scientist's dead daughter. It also looked quite like me, when I was 5 years old. The doll had been programmed with so much knowledge that in my opinion it was a genius. By the way it expressed itself, I worked out that it could be a university lecturer. I mentioned this to the man, telling him that she was far too intelligent for a normal 5-year-old girl. But he laughed and said that she was not normal, and she was not 5 years old. He also told me that she could run diagnostics on herself when something was not right, and she could also repair herself. I finally brought out what I had been waiting to say, and it had been very difficult. Sir, I thank you for all that you have bestowed on me. Even if I never write your message in book form, I will always be eternally grateful to the God of Abraham for your visit. But how am I going to manage to do all what you have said? I am an African girl with no resources, no personal fortune, and no influence whatsoever. How shall I even begin? Do not worry, the one who called himself Uriel said. Everything has been arranged. You have already begun. You have faithfully and fearlessly met us here, every day since we came, without failing. That proves to us that you are capable enough. What you did not realize is that you were free at all times to come to us or to stay away. But you still came. Nothing can stop the process now, because your dormant memories have been activated, and the desire to do the work will increase in you by itself. Therefore all that was supposed to happen to enable you to find yourself in the situation to do the work is also going to happen. I asked him to give me the shiny globe, so that I might keep it as a proof of our meeting, but he refused, saying, "For what we are sending you to do, there is no need for any extraterrestrial proof, because there is already a proof on Earth for you. If you can prove that the young man of France exists, that will be your proof. If he so much as declares himself and begins to talk about meeting Satan and Lucifer, that will be your proof. If he does all that we have said to you on their behalf and start a religious or political group, you shall be vindicated. He himself shall be your proof. But what shall I say, when people ask for a proof of what I shall write about, I mean about me personally meeting you? Do not worry, he said. When you have begun the work and it is well underway, you shall take 6 months of solitary retreat the Essene way, and shall work on the mysteries. Then you shall conduct yourself according to the wisdom of the mysteries if needs be, and all your glory shall be there for the whole world to see. But beware, do not go courting fame and renown for yourself, apart from getting the book that you shall write to be known all over Earth. We know that you will indubitably become famous after your book will be published, but do not let that fame go to your head. Remember, Do the work for the sake of those who shall be beguiled by the young man from France. Teach the mysteries for the glory of God the Mighty One, and for the transformation and for the divine realization of those who shall come to you. Your reward shall come from the success of the work you shall do. But we are not sending you to start a space alien-based religion. We are sending you to start an Essene community and to revive the Essene way of worship as it was, and also to teach the mysteries. Do not pay attention to those doubters who shall demand proofs. Those who shall be open-minded enough will believe you immediately after reading our message. Only pay attention to them and ignore the rest. But beware of those who shall come dressed as lambs, but who underneath shall be devouring lions. Beware of former sworn enemies who shall come bearing gifts. Be on your guard at all times. Be true to yourself, to those whose souls that were entrusted to you before you transmigrated to earth, and, most of all, be true to God the Mighty One. But what if I do not perform the 6 months operation, what then? I still asked hopefully and feebly. Then it won't matter very much. Believe me, all will be well, he said. There is also something that we have to tell you about the children you shall give birth to. They are not of your transmigration group. They are all tough old souls and individuals who have chosen to come and strengthen themselves on earth in their own unique ways. They shall do that by illnesses, poverty and life's hard experiences. They shall be a most constant source of pain, temptation and heartbreak for you, especially from your second child. Your relationship with her will be so difficult that you will conclude that she hates you. It will not be hate. She will simply want to live her life separately from you. So prepare yourself to remember the stoicism that was part of your grandfather's teachings. He was simply preparing you for the sorrows ahead. You shall suffer abuse and insults from your own children. But refrain yourself from cursing them or doing something spiritually harmful, as we know you shall be tempted to, many times. Remember, you agreed to let them come through you for their growth, because you knew that you could be up to the task. Being warned now, you shall understand why they will behave as they shall. They shall even oppose you at the beginning of your work. None of them will be willing to go for obtaining the mysteries, except for the first one, the one that you are pregnant with now, and the last 2. But of those last 2, the little boy shall be your heir of the mysteries, if you train him in time. Before that happens, he too will be a source of distress and worry for some time. But his sister born right before him could also surprise you in that she will be very interested in mysticism. We sympathize with you in advance for the pain that you shall suffer, and what you will see as lack of understanding from your own children. But nonetheless, love them, cherish them, and understand why they shall behave in such a manner. Most of all, let them read the book that you shall write. It is by recognizing themselves that their misunderstanding of you shall ease off. We could even go as far as to tell you, if we may, that, as one who knows and has been forewarned, try not to attach yourself to them. Let those who walk out on you do so without any complaints from you, because they shall not truly be yours. They shall come as aliens and separate individuals, having nothing in common with you. They will become alien to you almost immediately. But let them go, and let them be. Concentrate on the reasons why you, yourself, came to earth. You shall conceive 7 children, only 6 of them shall you get to know. I was quite intrigued and alarmed at those revelations concerning children that I had not even yet had. I did not know what to make of those words. And how did they even know that I was pregnant, as I had not told them about it? Finally, the brown one, who had been muttering on his handheld communication device, said, "Now come with us, we shall show you the young man from France." We went into an adjoining room of the space vessel. This one had windows. We all sat down and the space vessel rose and sped from the cocoa plantation. After what seemed like the same time it took to get to the Sahara Desert, only some 2 minutes later, the space vessel became stationary high up in space. "Look," said the one called Uriel. On the screen appeared a country scene, and a car heading toward a mountainous area. The landscape looked nothing like the African countryside which I was used to. The picture was magnified, and I saw that the car was being driven by a long-haired white man. The car suddenly stopped. The man sat still in the car, staring ahead, as if he were in a trance. "Where are we now?" I asked, surprised at what I saw. In France, of course. I was told. France. I was in France. A country that I had always longed to visit. And to say that I was there now, and I would even not set foot on it. I sat there, open-mouthed, unable to express any of the thoughts that were rushing into my mind. Then the car door opened by itself, and the man came out and stood beside it, still staring dumbly ahead. "Who is that?" I asked, full of curiosity. "That is the young man whom we have been telling you about," came the answer. Suddenly he was levitated into the space vessel, straight into the operation theater where messages had been recorded into my head. "Come," Uriel said to me. I followed him and the others, and we joined the two short, mongoloid aliens that were already there. Then I had the opportunity to see him for the first time. He was in his late 20s with long hair that I did not find very clean or healthy. He looked like someone of Hebrew descent. The white alien called Uriel warned me not to say anything, just as I was going to talk. So I shut my mouth and observed. The young man looked sleepy, and completely devoid of will. He slowly looked at the two small aliens and did not seem frightened or even surprised at the sight of them, like I had been when I had first seen them. It was only when he saw the white and brown aliens that he frowned a little. Whether he noticed me or not, I do not know. Then he turned back toward the two little aliens and some sort of smile came to his lips. "Claude," said Uriel, "we came to ask you for the last time not to do what Lucifer has asked you to. Would you promise us that you shall not be his messenger?" The question was asked in French. "Why should I listen to you?" The young man replied also in French. "How do I know that you are not those he warned me about? How do I know that you are not the bad ones?" Then he looked at the two little aliens and asked them. "And what are you doing here? Why are you two with them?" But he was ignored by the two aliens who simply looked back at him, and stood there very still, like two fine oriental statues. He was then answered by the brown alien who said, "You do not know them." After more pleading, the young man categorically refused to listen to them. He said that they had not offered him anything, contrary to his friends who had promised him fame and an easy and good life for the rest of his life and finally eternal life through their science. He swore that he was not going to let the chance of being someone and making a name for himself, and taking his place in history pass him by. In the end they dimmed the lights to near darkness. One of the small aliens placed a device that made a soft whistling sound on his temples. Then after a few seconds he stood up and was surrounded by a white light, and he disappeared. We all went back to the other room. On the screen, I saw him standing back beside the car. Then he got in, put his hands on the wheel and the car shot forward. Incredible! "Claude, is that his name?" I virtually shouted. "Yes, his name is Claude Virilne," said the one called Uriel. "What was that device that was pressed against his temples? What was it for?" I asked. "It was used to make him forget what has just happened. And Lucifer and Satan won't know that we talked to him either," I was told. "Well, that was him," said the brown one as in conclusion, "and you heard him. He wants to work for the renegades. Many times we have asked him to refuse Satan and Lucifer's offers, but every time, he has refused. We shall not trouble him any more. So, we too ask you to give our message to mankind. Let them choose freely. But why make him forget? Why not leave him with the memory? That way maybe his conscience might prompt him into doing the right thing?" I asked. "For many reasons. First of all, if we left him with the memory, he would tell the renegades, and Earth would witness a war of such magnitude that the whole planet would be destroyed, because we would be using our weapons in fighting them. And humanity would be worse off. We can simply fly away and go elsewhere, but humanity has not yet the technological capability to colonize other planets, or to even evacuate Earth at short notice. Secondly, we do not allow people to abstain in our dealings with them. They are either with us, or against us. Claude Virilne, the young man from France, knows right from wrong. He is a grown man. By his refusal to listen to us, he has proved to us that he is a danger to us and to humanity, believe me. Remember this, one day he shall be known and recognized as the anti-Messiah, the Antichrist of this era. he said resolutely. My friends began to say farewell to me as the space vessel returned to Africa. They all came and hugged me in turn, giving me their blessings and encouragements. To do this, they all surrounded me, and each one in turn put one hand on my head, the other on my shoulder, and gave me a traditional paternal blessing, bestowing a different gift to me, then praying God to strengthen and protect me. All, including the lady, did this, even the small aliens. I burst into tears when I realized that this was the last time I was going to see them. Would I ever see you again? I asked. Only if we are ordered by our leader to contact you. We never do anything without his approval, I was told. In that case, peace be with thee, I sobbed, crossed both my arms in front of my chest in the Essene manner. Peace be with thee, little one, and we leave you with the peace of God the Mighty One, they all said in unison, their arms also crossed in the Essene manner. I was taken back to my village, and this time I was levitated down right behind old Michel Evander's house, while the space vessel hovered high in the sky above it. As I arrived back home, looking very sad, tired, and walking slowly, my young brother Luke Roger, who was sitting on the kitchen's windowsill, announced grandly to all inside the house, in French. "Ah! The arrival of Porcupine," he said, calling me by the nickname of the woman whose name I was given. Thousands of thoughts swirled in my mind, wrestling with each other to come to the forefront. I had just been to France, and I could not even boast about it, or tell my best friends. Would I ever be able to talk, let alone write about these events? And if I dared to tell or write, who would believe me? Suddenly I felt very exhausted and totally drained of all energy. So I went straight to bed and did not come out again until the following morning. By then I felt very ill. I had a strong fever and violent headaches. My grandmother came looking for me when I did not appear for my breakfast, and found me wrapped into 3 thick woolen blankets, shivering and my teeth clattering. As everybody else celebrated Christmas, I lay in bed very ill, not eating, and drinking nothing but water, which tasted awful to me. I cried all the time, jumped every time someone made a sudden noise around me. When I slept, my dreams were filled with nightmares of war and sounds of cannons going off, and of bombs exploding everywhere. 2 weeks later, the fever finally fell and I recovered. But by the time I returned to Yaoundé and to my grammar school for the second term, I had lost a lot of weight and was no longer the same person inside. I had developed the compulsion to pinch myself regularly to be sure that I was awake. I counted all things that looked similar, and things that were placed or aligned in order. I had a compulsion to touch things, checked and rechecked that doors and windows were closed and that lights were extinguished, and I constantly checked myself when I went out to be sure that I had not put my clothes on inside out, and sometimes that I were even wearing clothes. When I walked, I kept my eyes to the ground, never stepping on cracked paving stones, and stepping only on full, undamaged ones. Thus obsessive-compulsive behavior came into my life, and it has stayed till now. All living creatures became a matter of observation and concern to me. I looked at both humans and animals, and wondered just what kinds of entities were looking at me behind those eyes. Thus my encounter with the lionin had come to an end. They existed indeed, as my dear grandfather had assured me, and I had met them. They had taught me just as he had promised me that they would. He had never lied to me. And now that he was dead, I had to continue where he had stopped. I had to stop any reasoning and abandon myself to the will of God the Mighty One, that he might pave the way for me to accomplish this heavy task, this important work that Elianin had given me. But that had not been the only drama in my life. During the following Easter holidays, 1974, my uncle, who by now knew that I was pregnant, had also come to the village and dragged me to the family of my ex-boyfriend, the father of the baby that I was expecting. He was now threatening to have him imprisoned, but I remained silent throughout all the proceedings. His father was tearing his hair out, regretting to have procreated an idiot instead of a son. His sisters were reviling me everywhere to any person that cared to listen to them, saying that if my family forced their brother to marry me, I would also be forced to leave their family by myself, when I see how they would all mistreat me. Frankly, being pregnant was now the least of my worries. My mind was so totally taken by Elianin, that I distanced myself from the whole matter. To begin with, I did not love him. I did not want to marry him. And I did not even want him involved in my baby's life. I could have told his sisters that, but I did not even bother. I let them rant for months till after the baby was born, and when they realized that I was not even interested in their brother that much, they relaxed and we became friends again.